Just to give you a little bit of background, the Oral History Society has held 8 in dialogue events over the last 2 years. So these have included discussions with a range of organizations and projects, which include people like the Southall Black Sisters, the George Padmore Institute, the Young Historians Project, the Ahmed Iqbal Ula Education Trust, and the Black Trade Union Oral History Project. And essentially, the aim of the dialogues is for a mutual sharing of interest and experience in the doing of oral history, researching the past through the memories of the people who have lived it. So the idea and commitment to dialogue follows from the Oral History Society's determination to acquire greater awareness and appreciation of Black and minority ethnic history, involving critical reflection and greater inclusivity in terms of the Society's organization, practice, and publications. And in this endeavor, the Oral History Society is grateful to the Institute of Historical Research for their continued support. So we're delighted that in this first In Dialogue event of the year, to be in conversation with Clinton Smith, who's the chair of the Preston Black History Group, and Dr. Helen Paul, who's an economic historian based at the University of Southampton. Their 15-minute presentations will be followed by a response from our discussant, who's Padmini Broomfield. Padmini is an Oral History Society trustee and coordinator of the Regional Network and advisor for the South East region. And thereafter, obviously, it'll be open to the floor to the online audience for a Q&A. So we aim to finish at 7:30. And I'd like to start this discussion by bringing on Clinton Smith. I'd like to just add, however, that Clinton seeks, with the support of members and advocates of the Preston Black History Group, to promote cultural understanding and educate the public on the far-reaching contributions of African and African Caribbean people in the UK. He collaborates with local museums, galleries, and libraries to share previously untold stories. He has been honored with various awards, including the 2018 Fusion Lifetime Community Achievement Award for services to race relations. I know he plans to tell us all about the co-production of the project that he and his partners launched in 2022. So I won't say any more about that, but I'd just like to mention that Glenetta Henry, who is one of the respondents that appears in their book, just to mention that she's actually joined us and is in the audience and will be open to questions later on in the program. So yes, if I can hand over to you, Clinton Smith, thank you so much for contributing to today's event.
As I said, me and technology don't fit in the same sentence. First and foremost, thank you very much for the invitation to be a part of this presentation. I felt honoured and privileged to be invited to speak at this event. As we said before, my name's Clinton Smith. I'm the chair of Preston Black History Group. It's a group that was constituted in 2011, and our strapline pretty much says what we're about. So it's about researching, preserving, and celebrating Black history and culture, a shared history for all. For us, that strapline is important because the "for all" is written in capitals. And we're trying to stress that Black history is an integral part of world history that's simply not been given the credit that it's due. So it's not about finger pointing, guilt laying, anything like that. It's all about positive education. Yes, there will be points along the journey that you uncover things that are difficult to process, deal with, and understand, but that hasn't stopped us from the journey that we've been on. So we've been double figures into this program. I'm also pleased to say that the group is a group of like-minded individuals. So we're not an elitist group. We have a constitution, and providing you're happy to operate within the confines of constitution, which is quite open, to be honest, you know, you're free to join on the condition, obviously, you don't bring the group into any sort of disrepute, which is a pretty standard requirement for most groups. Along the way, we've collaborated with a whole raft of people that will probably take up half my speaking time. So I'll just focus on the big one that has been really a good partnership, which is with an outfit called IHR, which is the Institute for Black Atlantic Research. And it's a group of academics based at the University of Central Lancashire in Preston. And that relationship goes back for literally as long as we've been constituted. And it's a really good relationship for both parties. One of the things that we realised was that a lot of the materials that's out there about Windrush and the Windrush generation and the associated issues with that, they very rarely mention Lancashire, and they certainly even rarer still mention Preston. But we have a Windrush community in Preston. So between Professor Alan Rice himself, who heads up IHR along with Lubena Himid, MBE, we decided that we were going to try and draw the spotlight onto Windrush residents in Preston. So we assembled 11 individuals, 6 females, 5 males, and we're really proud of the fact that we've got that mix, but even prouder still that they're from 4 different islands in the Caribbean. And between them, they've amassed somewhere around about 560 years of lived experience in Preston. And this is what we are bringing out into the community in Preston. When the collaboration started for this particular project, I was arrogant enough, brave enough, or stupid enough to put conditions on the project that the community suffering from interview rash, whereby different bureaucratic structures come in and they harvest the information they want, and the community has no idea what they're going to do with it. They don't see them again until there's another request for harvesting. So my conditions was that, one, I will assemble community and you can explain what it is you're looking to do. On the next visit, you can tell them what it is you've harvested and what you intend to do with it. And once it's a finished product, you're going to come back to the community again and show them what the finished product was. And that took the shape of, we actually had the book launch in a local West Indian working men's club in Preston. I think I probably expected some sort of a pushback from the university. So this little minnow's trying to dictate to, it's like Samson and Goliath type thing, but they took it in their stride and that they held their end of the bargain. We gave the contributors the option, wherever you were most comfortable, that's where we would have the interviews. So there's a whole raft of people. Some people are house proud, some people don't want you through the front door. So wherever you're most comfortable, that's where we reckon we were going to get the most out of you in the most relaxed manner. And it worked. It absolutely worked. Once we did the interviews, and they were carried out by Dr. Jack Hepworth, who's an experienced interviewer, we also made decisions that we weren't going to lead with questions, because that could steer people down particular paths. So we would just start the ball rolling and just let them go. So once that was transcribed, it was passed back to the contributors, and they decided what the final edit was going to be. So we had no control over that. We just did as we were requested to do. The book went off to print, came back. You've seen the image of the book. We were really pleased with the end product based on the time and the resources that were available to do that. Once the book was launched, it was suggested that we submit the book to the Alan Ball Award, which is effectively a library service award. And that was submitted, and we picked up one of two awards nationally for community publication. Now, they only give out two nationally across the country. So for a first attempt, we were just absolutely blown away with that. Since the award, the book is now on the shelves of all the libraries in Lancashire. So the library service locally have taken that on board. We've had tremendous support from some sections of the union who bought the book to stock the mini libraries at different branches. And last year we were invited, no, let me rephrase that. The ladies were invited to salute our sisters at the University of Central Lancashire. And we ran a fabulous evening from that event. And that was hosted by one of the ladies. Everything is happening within this group. The ladies are far more active than the men, I'm almost ashamed to say. So Glenetta was the anchor, and she was in conversation with each of these ladies, and it worked really well. We played to virtually a full house, so we're talking just short of 100 people. So the difference between 90 and 100 is negligible. So effectively for me, that's a full house. The acid test was that at the end of the planned event, we literally had to look around for squeegees to squeeze people out the door because nobody wanted to go. They just engaged with the ladies and the conversation just carried on. And I suspect it would have carried on for, I don't know how much longer, but the university does not offer bed and breakfast for these kind of events. What next? Immediately after the book launch, I was approached by a couple of people from the community on the same night, and it wasn't a discussion, it wasn't an option. The conversation was an instructions. You have to do a book 2, and here are 3 people that I think you should include in book 2. Since then, a number of people have come and said the same thing. We have a desire to do it, but we are an incredibly small team, punching somewhere way above our heads, but we will get round to doing a book 2. We also had a lengthy interview on local radio where 2 of the ladies went in and I went in really as a chaperone. I'm reasonably familiar with the structure at Radio Lancashire. And it was a conversation with 2 of the ladies, and they just spoke. It went on for just short of 25 minutes. And when we came out of the studio, it was live, it wasn't recorded as well. So there's no pressure for the ladies, just you're on. When we came out of the studio, one of the staff at the station said to me, "What have you got on this interviewer, presenter?" Nothing. Why? Very few people get the length of time as a live interview that you just got. You must have something on him. I said, "No, we just have an interesting story to tell." And he was bitten by it and he wouldn't let it go. So we've got that as part of our archive for that. In terms of the attitude within the community, that's changing because now people can see that we're trying to leave a footprint, a legacy that's there for future generations to have as research material. And the sales within the community have been very encouraging for that. So for me, it's a massive thank you to the contributors, Jack Hepworth for his skills with interviewing. With all the images you see within the book, again, that was a huge discussion. Are we going to go colour? Are we going to go black and white? This, that? And we had a more than competent photographer who's captured all the images. As a group, we are blessed. We have 2 photographers who now record our journey in pictorial form. But none of this would be possible without the support and encouragement from Professor Alan Rice from UCLA. And he just agrees something, he's hands off, just lets me get on with what I'm good at doing. And the end product you can see through there. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, Rita. Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, just to say you've got about 4 more minutes.
Right. Okay. So that's one section that we're really proud of, and it continues. Since then, we have been invited into a number of schools because there seems to be a thirst now for local black history, and we're trying to satisfy that thirst by going in and talking about people that some of the students will relate to, some would have seen on the streets, they'll see them in things like Carnival, which Preston used to have the second largest carnival in England. It's now sadly shrinking back. But we go into schools now, or we're invited into schools to present local black history. Geographically, Lancaster is 30 miles north of Preston, and we were invited by the Duke's Theatre to deliver the Windrush programme last year. Again, that's going into schools in the north of the county, and that culminated in a small exhibition that was put on at the City Museum. So some of the people from the book came up, and we opened the exhibition, and again, it was another success, massive smile on our faces. So lots can be achieved, and I think as I come towards the end of my time, what I would like to leave this meeting with is to send a message out that it's not academics are not the only ones who can record history. I'm not an academic, but obviously you'll learn to modify your language according to the avenues that you go down. But I think for a lot of people that talk about history and research in academia is 3 scary triplets. And if one thing can go from this, and I'm happy to be used as an example, and I'll try and support anybody I can, you have the skills within your community. You have the raw materials within your community. Capture it, have it written as you want it written, not as somebody else is going to write it to represent you. I think I've probably just about come to the end of my allotted time.
You're a star. Thank you so much for that, Clinton. That's absolutely fabulous. And I'll just do the clapping on the behalf of everybody else.
Thank you.
You won't be able to hear everybody else online, but also just to show, because you didn't do a PowerPoint, I just wanted to show everyone the end product. Absolutely fantastic book. So thank you so much for that. Wonderful presentation there, and Clinton. And we'll move now, before we go to Padmini, we'll move now to Dr. Helen Paul.
Thanks.
So Helen, if I may, was the Honorary Secretary of the Economic History Society and is a Fellow of the Royal Historical Society. She's actually working along with her colleague, Dr. Gillian Kennedy, on a project, Black Communities in Hampshire. My understanding is that the project aims to use existing oral history recordings from the 1980s onwards, and also to commission new ones. The new interviews will be carried out by younger members of the Black community in order to create a co-produced piece of research. And then they aim to create a podcast and temporary exhibition to look at the following themes, which are Black history and railways and protest movements. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us, Helen. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Juanita. Can you hear me all right?
I certainly can, yes.
Good, marvelous. And I'll just try and share my screen. So you should see in a second
I can see the University of Southampton.
a blue screen that says the University of
Yep.
Southampton. Good. So that's right. There we are. So yes, this is a project that's just in its early phases on Black heritage in Hampshire. And I'll explain to you a little bit about why it's the seemingly odd combination of railways and protest movements. My colleague Jill Kennedy would love to be here, but she's got twins, so she can't do the evening shift. She is an expert in politics, and therefore that's where the protest movement bit comes in. She started off being involved in Middle Eastern politics and Egypt, and then after she had the twins and all the trouble in the Middle East, she couldn't do that, so she's had to pivot. I am an economic historian, as Juanita said, and so I work on things like the long 18th century, the 19th century, which brings us into railways, but also into a longer history of Black presence in Britain before Windrush, because it's important to remember that too. So if you have anything to say that you've forgotten to say during the talk, you can always email me. There's my email, but also you can find it on my staff pages. So as Juanita said, we were looking at the fact that there was scattered across Hampshire various oral history recordings done at different times. In fact, some of which were done by Padmini, and we've been using them. So thanks very much, Padmini. But not all of them are by someone from the Oral History Society, and that's where there might be a problem, because sometimes, as we shall see, those recordings don't come with all the proper forms and paperwork that they need. We also thought we would commission new co-produced oral history research. So our thought was we would get people from the Black community, from the younger generation, and they would help to shape what questions were asked. The reason we've hit on themes like railways is partly to do with the way funding works, that you need a kind of hook. So this is our hook. But protest movements is obviously something as well that we expect to get a lot on, but we'd also be just willing to create oral histories that are much more broad-based, and then they could be put in an archive and reused by somebody in the future on whatever theme they thought was important. And of course, we can't really tell what's going to come out of this because we haven't interviewed anybody yet. We are funded by two different grants: the University of Southampton Centre for the South and Research England, which is part of the UKRI. And the idea for that is this helps to shape a lot of how you do things in terms of your timing. You have to have things like Gantt charts and budgets and ethics approval. And actually, it would be lovely if we didn't have all these things, but we do. And this partly shapes what you do and how you do it, including ideas around outputs, because as Juanita and others will know, there's something called the Research Excellence Framework that is this kind of strange bean counting exercise done by the government. Whether we'll have another one is a moot point, but it does weird things, like it says there's a difference between impact and public engagement. What's that then? Well, public engagement is a pathway to impact, but it's not. So there's a lot of weird behind the scenes bureaucracy that you really will deal with if you work with an academic and they suddenly say, can you do this and can you do that? Can you write me letters? Can you fill in this form? It's become more and more bureaucratic. But our thought was, our idea of knowledge exchange and co-production would be getting the younger people from the Black community to talk to older members of the community and to shape the kind of questions that we had, but also to shape the kind of outputs, particularly regarding their techie knowledge that even we old timers don't have, things like TikTok or whatever else they think might work. Podcast and an exhibition was our idea, and that's what we told the funders, because that's the sort of stuff people of our age think of. But if they found something else that was more up to date and trendy, then we would be happy to go with that. There is a bit of leeway between what you say on your funding document and what you actually then produce, as long as you produce something. So why railways? Well, part of it is that being in Hampshire, everything has been focused on the fact that we have big port cities like Southampton and Portsmouth and various smaller ports as well. Windrush, of course, the Windrush generation, the Windrush may have gone elsewhere, but of course, some people came to Southampton. And we have all kinds of linkages where people came onto the docks and then got straight onto a train. And so, perhaps making a rod for our own backs, we decided we were going to go look at the train system, because it hadn't really been looked at before. And it was a space that, other than quite recently with things like, say, the Black trade union movement and train workers, it wasn't something that had actually been associated with either Hampshire history or Black history in Hampshire or anything thereof. So it was a bit of a kind of, here's a gap, let's tell the funder we're going for that. As you probably know, some of the train companies, the original companies, had something to do with the plantation systems because of where the money came from to fund them. But as you may be less well aware, there were also a method by which abolitionists went round and drummed up audiences for abolitionism, not just in terms of the British world, but also subsequently US abolitionism. There are also, perhaps more happily, things to do with migration. There's workers and passengers, people using the trains to go up to London, maybe to go to the Notting Hill Carnival, or to go to a protest, or just to see some friends or buy some food or whatever. We were quite happy to use this, as I say, as a hook. And therefore we were looking for people that might have something to do with the railways. Eastleigh, which is a big town in Hampshire, was a big railway manufacturing type place. There's also a lot of railway that just isn't there anymore, which we thought might be quite interesting, including this. Yes, if you look at the bottom picture, you will see the old military railway, because Hampshire, quite strangely, had Longmoor Military Railway. It's just a steam train, basically. But what this was a strange arrangement. Well, I suppose strange. It was a training facility, because trains were used throughout the empire to move troops, people, and everything else around. And it's very famous, the idea of trains in India as a way of extracting resources from India or moving troops around India. But where did the people who put those trains on the tracks get a lot of their expertise? And particularly in times of warfare, say during the Second World War, where did people get their expertise to put trains back on the rails after they'd been derailed by enemy action? And so that is Longmoor Military Railway, where they would practice chucking these massive steam trains off the rails and sticking them back on again. I couldn't find any nice pictures, other than the one at the bottom, of that railway, because there's lots of fairly dull black and white pictures of locomotives. So instead, I've got a couple of posters of films you might recognise, which were filmed partly on the Longmoor Military Railway. The Lady Vanishes, the early version, and The Great St Trinian's Train Robbery, both of which were on that track. When I've gone through Hampshire Record Office and looked at their copious collection of books on railways and trains, there's a whole lot there, including things like the bananas that come along the docks, that came in from the Caribbean, and there was a special line of trains to get the bananas from What's Banana Wolf along train lines that go all over the place. So interestingly, we've already found things like people would come by ship from the Caribbean, and then there'd be nothing arranged for them officially. So they'd get to the train station, which was in those days right next door, and there'd be a load of volunteers waiting to help them. And we were interested in, well, who were they? How did they get there? All these kinds of questions come up, which we weren't expecting. And to loop back to the stuff that's in the archives that people have written books on, a lot of the books are very technical, and you never see anybody Black in any of them because you don't see many people at all in any of them. They're just loads of pictures of trains. So that's possibly why this has not been a particularly overly well explored area. But we thought, you know, it's the sort of thing that we can take in different directions depending on what people tell us and what there is already. How am I doing for time, Juanita? You're still muted.
Sorry about that. 4 more minutes.
Lovely. So in theory, we would be working, doing knowledge exchange and co-production, which there are various definitions of this. You're supposed to work with groups and community groups for all stages of the research process. So for example, patients explaining to clinicians how they feel and how they should be treated and all this sort of stuff. And it's sometimes works really well. The idea being that you have this very top-down process with a precise set of research questions in advance, which is all about the project. And yet, if you are really working on co-production, it's partnership focused. So that loops back to the Preston examples, clearly a long-term basis, but it doesn't fit well with these crackpot ref metrics, the way of trying to measure what we do, or the existing power structures. So where we were going to get people from was at least partly from our awarding gap project, which is, as you can probably see, aimed at reducing the gap between different categories of students. So basically Black and marginalized minority ethnic students. And therefore, we've already got lots of enthusiasm from that side. We've got fewer actual interviewees. It's becoming difficult to try and get at that. But where we've really hit the skids is the compressed time frame of applying for grants and also being able to service the needs of the grant. It's incredibly tight, and it's difficult if you're dealing with community groups where they also have a lot of calls on their time. And then you have to do things like get letters of support from them, or we've had all kinds of things with people who've gone into hospital, people whose Wi-Fi doesn't work. The assumption that everybody's ready to go really privileges people who are in good health, loads of time, wonderful Wi-Fi, etc. And that's not necessarily the case with all community groups. Ethics approval, I could go on about that for ages. It's been torturous. It's just legal documents and them saying things like, why are you not specifying a list of questions in advance? Because we're co-producing. We don't know what questions would be the most valuable. This is part of the excitement of the project. And then this proof of impact nonsense where you show that you've made a difference. You haven't simply engaged the project public, you have impacted them in a measurable way. It's painful. I can talk more about it. You probably don't want to know, but I think Juanita's going to, oh, no, don't talk about impact, please.
You have my sympathy.
Yes. So a lot of this stuff cobbles what academics do in ways that are just really baffling to outsiders. We found the existing recording material. British Library was hit by a cyber attack. Southampton City's got some material. We discovered that they had made a listening copy of some of their material and they'd been required to give that to somebody who then didn't give it back. So that seems to have soured relationships. Sometimes people have misunderstood that, think they've lost all the material. They have the originals. We have things where outside of the council holdings, where people have got things in their own homes, they've got them in old bits of kit, they don't have the legal documentation to back them up. Who's got the copyright? GDPR doesn't mean anything to them. And also, I suppose, dealing with people who perhaps have a fantasy that they're going to move all this material into one place. It's currently split between Southampton City Council and Hampshire County Council. I don't see that changing, plus the stuff that's in private hands. We were asked if we could take these into the university archives, and the answer was no from our archivist. She said, we're not set up for that. So there are all kinds of things that you find out only painfully as you go forward, as I'm sure anyone who's done one of these projects in real life will know. So there's been an awful lot of learning stuff behind the scenes. But thanks very much indeed for listening. And again, if you'd like to email me more about the project, or if you have anything to do with Southampton, Hampshire more broadly, even the small stuff, please do let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was absolutely fabulous, Helen. Just really interesting to get insights into how challenging the project is. And I'm sure there's many people online who could probably empathize with the difficulties that you're going through. I'd now like to bring in our discussant, Padmini Broomfield. But just to say that Padmini's oral history journey actually began in the late 1990s at Southampton Oral History Unit, with recording the lives of Asian women, shipyard workers, and local communities. She's now a freelance consultant working with heritage, educational, and community organizations on participatory projects that explore the lesser-known stories of people, places, and working lives. She also provides training, mentoring, and external evaluations of heritage projects. And she's particularly interested in collaborations where her interviews are interpreted and presented in creative ways to engage and captivate people. So I think Padmini is perfectly placed to be the discussant on today's session. Padmini, over to you.
Thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. And more importantly, what is great about our two speakers, we're hearing from the two sides, from the academic side, from universities, the kind of constraints people work with, but also from Clinton working from the community side, and how that collaboration is really, really important, and conversation is important, but also that each of them are aware of the constraints of the other. I thought that was really, really interesting, and I'm hoping that there'll be a lot of discussion. So I'll keep my contribution brief. I think what came through from Clinton's was that long-term collaboration with the university that the Preston group have had over the years, and that has led to the current book, but also it appears that because of that, there has been a sort of much more developmental work, whereas quite often we find projects sometimes are very short-term. Relationships get built up with partners, and then once the project ends, you know, everyone goes their own way, and then the next time the same group or the university or the academic institution needs to do something, you have to start from scratch all over again. So that it's been really great to hear that the Preston group have kept that relationship going. And I was really interested in Clinton's point where he said when they first approached him to work with the group, he talked about the concerns that the group had about organizations coming into community and harvesting information, which is always something that those of us who work in the community oral history sector are quite aware of, that sometimes can be a barrier for community participation. So it was really interesting and sort of something to learn from, where Clinton talks about right at the start, laying down the kind of things that they would like to see to continue that collaboration. And I thought that that was really I think, Clinton, it sounded like you were surprised that there was no pushback to it, but it just shows that sort of, you know, where they were really sort of open to doing exactly what you felt would be useful, which was to come and tell us what you want to do, come and tell us what you've done, and then present the work. Those of us who worked in local authority contexts with community groups, this is just something that we take for granted. So there are different sort of relationships, I suppose. But I think, you know, you laying down those conditions at the start seems to have worked really well in the long term. And it looks like that sort of collaboration with the academics has also sort of been widened, because you work with all sorts of different groups, and your book has now sparked off a lot of interest from schools, as well as you say, the local community, the local radio. And I really liked your point where you said, right at the end, where you encapsulated your experience, where you said, academics are not the only ones who can record history. Communities can also, they have the skills and their lived experience to be able to tell their own stories. And what is wonderful is that here you've brought both these constituencies of people to work together so that it worked for all of you. But, you know, we'd be willing, you know, we'd be really keen to hear from you about all the other things that took place. Helen's, on the other hand, Helen is just starting. And I think, you know, I'm hoping that Helen finds that Clinton's experiences might go some way into easing the path, because she did talk about a lot of the issues that she's going through. And there are a couple of things, I think, Helen, you and I need to have a discussion about some of the issues about the myth of the lost archives. It's a long-standing thing, and I feel very strongly about it, but we need to deal with that as we come along. But those are the kind of things, because if there is a misunderstanding, which appears to have been the case, that can influence in the long term how communities then respond to the next organization or institution that approaches them to do a new project. And I think Helen's talking about those challenges. So how do we go beyond that? But also some of the things that we need to work out, and that's interesting about the ethics approval. It's also a matter of conversation, just as Clinton sort of said, this is what we would like to work with. I think Helen also has identified that she, you know, the communities need to know that she's also got constraints with the ethics approval and the budgets and the bureaucracy and things like that. So it just appears, I mean, it's really been interesting to see these two sides, and I'm really keen to sort of open up the discussion to people to either comment or ask our speakers any questions, because there are so many different points they've made about the successes, the benefits of working together, the challenges and how you overcome them. And basically, what can we all learn from both your experiences if we wanted to do something similar? So over to everyone to ask questions.
Thank you, Padmini, for you know, your response to both of those presentations. Has anybody got any questions? If you just put your hand up, use the emoticon if you've got a particular question. There's a question that's just come through from Heather Needham. I'll read it. It's in the chat. Would Clinton have any advice for how archives can engage with community groups, writing their own story, so that adding these stories to the archives becomes a regular feature rather than project-specific, time-limited work?
Whilst I will start off by saying, I think we've got a fairly unique set of circumstances here in Preston and Lancashire in general. It's also the home for Lancashire Archive. So we've simply been brave enough to walk into the archive and say that you don't have enough materials in about my community. The materials you have, you've got in a basement storeroom somewhere. You need to reflect the community that you're supposed to be representing. And you might be pleasantly surprised to find that sometimes it's not a hard sell. As I said before about schools, there's a lot of places want to do something. They don't know what it is they should be doing or who they should be contacting. And sometimes it just takes that brave decision to walk into someone's office and just be yourself and just put your paint. I talk about painting pictures, and I go into different offices. If I can take you back to my first encounter with Professor Rice. Walked in, the first thing I did was I addressed him as Professor Rice, and then very, very quickly abandoned it. So there was two individuals talking about a common subject. It was a similar situation at the archives, where I went in, said who I was, what we did, what we'd done, and that this is the only place that it should be based at, for everyone to come and use as a resource. So in short, I think it just requires that brave decision that I'm going to go in, have a clear vision in your own head, what it is you're trying to do. And sometimes, and this is a mistake a lot of us make, we don't think about what the other side of the desk wants. We just go with a series of demands through a set of eyes that we see. And sometimes we just need to sit on the other side of the desk and think, okay, fine, this stranger's wandered in off the street. Yes, it sounds good, but how does it fit into our overall plans? And do we have to amend those plans to incorporate these nuggets that's coming in? So just be brave and have that quiet conversation.
Thank you, Clinton. Dr. Milton Brown has a question, and then also Joanna. If I can, Milton, do you want to ask your question? You'll need to unmute. Okay. Okay, sorry, Milton, while you're unmuting, can I go to Joanna Bonnet first?
Yeah, I wanted to, something that Clinton said made me think about the process of co-production, because co-production's become it's become a buzzword, really. It's the latest thing. I know this from my borough, Haringey, where co-production is being used to deal with policy development with local people and dealing with issues that are arising, which is rather different from oral history. But Clinton, you said something about the interviewees were, I don't know, they either asked or encouraged or they edited their own interviews. So I guess they were, once they're deposited in the archive, they're not exactly what was spoken. They are an edited version of that. And I was wondering how you negotiated that, and how does that fit? Is that a challenge to co-production, or do you feel that that is actually what co-production is at its heart? It's amending the process in some way to fit different needs, because in some ways co-production is it could be a challenge on either side, couldn't it, to how you understand what the story is or what the story is going to be as it's a preserved story. So I'm kind of interested in how co-production works in oral history. Basically, we call it shared authority in oral history often. Co-production, is it the same thing as shared authority? I mean, I'm probably asking too many questions here, but I'm rambling really. But it was your comment about editing the interviews for publication or for transcription that interested me.
Thanks for that, Joanna. If I can add to that, Clinton, that was the thing that really struck me about what you were talking about, because I was thinking, oh, what was taken out? Was something taken out that was really juicy, that it might have been really fascinating to the historian or the academic, but which, you know, to the community was something, you know, that wasn't important or didn't need to be kept in. So I just wondered if you ever had any friction, I think is what Joanna's pointing to, about what material got taken out.
No friction whatsoever. Let me say that this only worked because of a level of trust that was built up between all the participants, the interviewing team, the transcribing team, etc. What happens is that we assure people that we're not going to dictate what went in, and they would have the final say. And sometimes I've probably thrown you a little bit of a red herring in one sense, because particularly when people reflected back to the Caribbean, and they've been here 50, 60 years, the interview finishes and they go away, and, oh, I forgot to mention such a thing, or they think about a sequence that they remembered, and there's things missing from that sequence. So it's not about filtering the laundry before it gets hung on the line. It's just about making sure that they're happy with it and it's accurate. So it's really as simple as that. But the buzzword is absolute trust. We went to great lengths to keep everybody in the loop. And since the publication, I gave a commitment that I would keep, every time the book took a journey, the story took a journey, I would tell them what was happening. And so far, I've produced something like 5 updates from that to keep them in the loop. But a really good, I'm going to call it a byproduct, and it's a disgraceful word to use, because what I said earlier on, that there were people from 4 different islands. What we've now got is a group of sisters who will compete with any family structure in terms of cohesiveness. That was never part of the original brief. Not that it was deliberately ruled it out, but that's a brilliant byproduct. And we have a commitment now. We've already run 2 or 3 things to keep the group together. We have a commitment now that they will decide on the direction of travel, and I will horse trade what I need to horse trade to try and make that direction of travel a reality. And what it started to do is to address some of the things around loneliness and isolation. It's opened the door to a whole avenue of social issues, and people have come out of themselves, but it's because of that level of trust and understanding that's built in. And I can't stress that enough. It's the maker or breaker of what you do.
And I think that, Clinton, it sounds like your role there has been pretty crucial, because you're the one right from the beginning that started these negotiations with the university and kind of built that trust from the beginning, when perhaps the other members of the community were less involved directly with the university. So, what you're saying really boils down to that initial conversations building, and over the years you have built that trust. So I think that role sounds incredibly crucial there. Am I right that?
No, you're absolutely right. And for me, as I said, I've grown up looking up to a lot of these people, so they've known me from I was knee-high to nothing. But again, it doesn't matter where you start the journey with the contributors. It's that level of trust and understanding. If you say you're going to do something, do it. I was fortunate that I saw the misfortune that different bureaucratic structures have done, where I think I called it interview rash, where I've seen that, and I was determined I wasn't going to add to the community's situation, because there's no anti-interview rash cream that's been put together yet. I've replaced that with courtesy, common sense, and respect, and it absolutely worked.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I don't know if Milton's.
Yes, I'm here now. Sorry about that. Good evening, everyone. First of all, I think the speakers I've heard tonight has been outstanding. There's several things that really concern me to some degree. So for Clinton is a very experienced, incredible, articulate man. He's an elder, held in high esteem. in communities such as people of African descent. So there was the bridge. And I commend everything that Clinton's done. Dr. Paul, I found it pleasing in a nice way and in a very positive way to hear your frustrations around all the ethics concerning university. I am an academic, but I also have lived and breathed community. So I bridge the two. And my concern is the power structure, just even the language of academics. Clinton can handle that. Many others can't. That even the language has a power dynamic when you're talking to, in such cases, of people of African descent. How are you bridging that gap? What are you learning about the community? Not just for the research, but for you as a professional that you can take. Is that measured? How is that measured? And the other thing is, what's the legacy? Are you leaving that community in a better place than when you found it? How is all the research and the final paper shared within that community? Where is it stored? And the last point I want to make is revisit. A lot of people of African descent, we're into probably 6th, 7th generation now. People are revisiting trauma when they're talking about Windrush. How is that supported when you're working with these communities? And whether it's Asian or the Gypsy community, irrespective of what community, these are the things, in all honesty, I still don't see academics or institutions are considering. So the question is, what's the legacy? And if you've got time to answer, how are you looking at this? The narrative of working with these communities and their cultural history, their social cultural history. Thank you.
Thanks, Milton. Yeah, so I got 3 questions there, I think, from what you were saying. One about academic language as a power dynamic, and see the legacies, where are the archives being stored, and then how are you dealing with trauma?
And I guess it's ownership. It's ownership of the
end product.
Right. So one of the things we found with our ethics system is some of it was really helpful because it pushed questions about how do you deal with people who might be traumatized by what they're saying or having to revisit. Do you have a plan in place as to how you're going to deal with that and how you're going to acknowledge that trauma, but also maybe point them in the direction of specific resources, particularly for the Black community? And I do have a list of them somewhere in my ethics folder. I haven't actually gone back through the ethics process because even though they accepted that side of it, one of the weird things that came back was questions about why can't you create a list of questions in advance? And the answer to that is, we aren't creating a list of questions in advance because we don't necessarily know the most interesting questions to ask, and therefore the community would work on those themselves to think about what they want to know. The way in which we're trying to bridge the generation gap between a large number of really great students, younger people, and the fact that in Southampton we have the same people who are asked to do all the work all the time, a bit like Clinton clearly is that person in Preston. But in Southampton, there are still certain people who've done this for years, who've been interviewed before, and this kind of thing is coming out with the issue of the myth of the lost archive, which is clearly a Southampton saga that we're going to get in, I'm probably going to get into with Padmini over a coffee. But basically, my colleague Jill has spent a lot of time talking to some of the really key elders within the community and listening to them about their concerns. And some of the time, you just have to say, well, I'm sorry, I can't do anything about these concerns. The ownership that they would ideally want is the removal of material from existing archives at Southampton City and at Hampshire into their own hands to create an archive of their own, which sounds great in theory, but where's the funding for that? Where's the longevity for that? And also legally, prizing anything out of the hands of an existing archive is almost, I would think, impossible. Deaccessioning things. So in terms of the ownership, we would push back against this idea that the ethics approval people had of completely anonymizing people, whether they liked it or not. I don't know why they were so, maybe it's just our people within the system, but they seem really kind of risk averse. And we were saying, you know, and in terms of my various grapplings with bits of the system, I was talking to one of our in-house lawyers and saying, it's important that people have agency, and that's part of the reason they want their names, or they might want their names attached to their recordings and not simply completely anonymized. I think that system must come from some kind of medical ethics type background. So what we've got at the minute is the Wessex Film and Sound Archive as our chosen place to put these recordings so that they would be available easily to the community, because they're set up, basically, if you can get into the search room, you can listen to the archives. And that would be the long-standing legacy of it. So we've thought very carefully about that. But what we expect is we won't learn the full extent of what we could learn until the interviewing process starts. We haven't actually started hearing what people have to say because we haven't set everything up. We have to get all of these students trained. We have to discuss with them what they think are the key points within some kind of framework to do with the funding. But basically, what do they think is an interesting question to ask elders in their own community? Because we feel that there's a disjoint between some of this fairly transient student community and then this small group of elders who are maybe town and gown, if you know what I mean. I'm not sure if that's answered all three parts of the question, but if not, you can always email me or reiterate it.
May I respond very, very quickly, please?
Go ahead, Milton.
Thank you for that, because why I was pleasantly pleased is I feel you care. You try and get all that out the way, to just go and feel these people and do them justice. But here's the challenge. How do you balance that ownership? And I always feel that universities don't, because of the funding structures and everything else, it's about results to protect the quo of that university. And in that, it indirectly discriminates against the communities they work with. I'd like to see who's preparing your researchers to go and work with this community. Who's the bridge? Clinton's done it for the Preston community, and I applaud that. But that in itself is start of co-production, knowing that community before you even go in there. Who are the elders? You know, the intergenerational elders and the inter-islands that exist in that one community. It's more than the Black community. It's the people of African descent community. And there's lots of different cultures and nuances that we need to be aware of. And I appeal for anybody doing research with any of these groups is to do that research before you even apply for funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that feedback. Really important feedback there, Milton. I wanted actually to come to Malcolm. I think you had your hand up first and then go to John. Malcolm, do you want to?
I thought both presentations were wonderful, and they raised a lot of issues that I've been thinking about at the moment. I'll get cut to the quick. My question is really about the end part of a project about transcripts, transcribing. The previous speaker talked about language and power. In a project that I was involved in a while ago, we were trying to identify transcribers who could transcribe regional accents rather than have transcripts in what is known as standard English. I just wondered how the two projects have thought about that. So language, power, transcribing, and what is actually written of the project.
Can I take that one? I'm starting to giggle away, worse than a Cheshire cat. If I can share a little bit of the story. The transcriber that we had is an American living in the north of Lancashire. So she's going through a transition. When the contributors went back in time into the Caribbean, as they went back, their accents came back as well. So we had people from Barbados who speak at like 90 miles an hour. And if you miss the first couple of words, then you're out in the fog because you're trying to play catch up all the time. We have people from Montserrat who speak with like a little bit of a drawl sort of thing. We have the Jamaicans who they're just Jamaicans. And again, we have the Dominicans who speak with kind of not a really thick accent, but with an accent. And suddenly this American who's learning English is now having to transcribe Caribbean dialect, which she did. And when I say we didn't change anything, some of the things we went back to the contributors with was to clear up exactly what they were saying. And we used the words, once we worked out what they were, we used the words that they were using. And it was just dialect. So to come forward, you talk about what happens afterwards. All our material, it was a predetermined decision that it was going to end up in the Lancashire archive. I come from a sports background, and the number of times I've seen people go to awards evening, they get a trophy, they go home, they put it in the bottom drawer, shut the bottom drawer, and never sees the light of day again. We weren't going to invest this much time into something for that to end up in the bottom of some dusty library somewhere. It went out, and I said the bonus is it's in the libraries across Lancashire. It's in the Union Library, it's in the county depository. So yes, it can be done. And again, all this was explained to the contributors. They all have a copy of everything they did. So they have the originals and where they amended things and corrected things. So there wasn't a lot of chopping and changing. A lot of it really was around clarifying. I think you've said this. Can you clarify that for me? And how do I spell it? Because that was the other part of it. Maybe I'm one of the world's greatest optimists, but it's got to be a can-do attitude, doubled up with its twin, honesty and integrity, and it just works. It absolutely works.
Did they want some of the words changed? You know, spoken language is very different to when you transcribe. So I just wondered whether that had to be negotiated, because sometimes when you write a book based and use the quotes from the interviewees, it doesn't sound as you would normally write it. Did you have those issues with the interviewees wanting to change that?
No, it wasn't no. There was an absolute guarantee that we weren't going to dictate to them what they said, how they said it, the language they used. So that really wasn't an issue for us. As I said, the most return journey was just to clarify that the transcriber was hearing West Indian accents correctly and West Indian words, that they're also in the Standard English Dictionary, and they're actually in the book. Shameless plug, when you read the copy of the book, I'm sure you'll all be chasing at some point, you'll see that comes up in the book. We've not taken those words out, they're in. So when you first read them, I think, oh, I don't understand that word, it's disjointed. No, it's not. trying
you.
to understand how the speaker is speaking.
Thank you for that, Clinton. Helen, did you want to respond to that question as well?
Yes, certainly that's something came up. My colleague Jill, who's on these various committees and things, and she's a kind of liaison with various community leaders, and that's something that's been said to her, is that in the past, the recordings have potentially been left untranscribed, and one of the concerns for the ones that aren't transcribed is who's going to do that, and are they going to get the words right? So the idea of, and also there is somebody who actually works, that I know, who works on Caribbean Englishes, different formats, different over time and in different locations in the Caribbean. That so for us, we would either use some of our own students who are doing the interviews, because they would presumably be understanding a spoken type of speech that maybe their mum or their dad or their granny spoke anyway, and or we can double check with something called the English Project based at the University of Winchester, where they have a capacity to talk about Caribbean Englishes. I'm actually in an economics department, so I don't work on the English language per se, but certainly being a Geordie myself, I understand a bit of what you mean about the idea that you don't necessarily, not everyone understands Geordie, for example, strong Geordies. So how would you do that? You'd need somebody who understood what was being said. So absolutely. So that's what we've thought about doing. But we think as well we'd be able to recruit somebody really good from within our student group once we see them in action.
Thank you, Helen. I just wanted to bring in John now, if I can, and then there's a couple more questions that I'd like to ask that are in the chat. John?
Thank you. Can you hear me, Juanita?
Yes, I can. Yes, go ahead.
Great. Okay. Just a couple of points, one about anonymity and the other about co-production, because I thought they were both interesting questions and responses. But thank you both for your presentations. I really enjoyed them, and they really made me think in terms of relationships between communities and universities in these kinds of projects and the challenges around them. Just to pick up on Helen's point, I think you're right, Helen, about the issue of anonymity perhaps being kind of having its origins in medical ethics, but it's not confined to medical ethics now, and certainly in a social science department where I've taken various projects to the ethics review panel. It's a widespread assumption that you would use anonymity in social research for the purposes of confidentiality and privacy and so on. And that has been a challenge, as we know, in oral history, where in many instances we want, and our subjects want, to be named because the histories that we're recording are empowering for those people and those communities. So why not name yourself and not hide behind the kind of anonymity thing? But on the other hand, we also find in interviews in oral history that not everybody does want to be named for lots of good, genuine reasons. And I think it's important that the society and the oral history as a whole takes account of that and is sensitive to those. That's not to say that those stories aren't invaluable in terms of their contribution to the archive. It's just that we won't have a name associated with them. And the other thing I just wanted to sort of say, so yeah, really to Clinton, I think, and in answer to Joanne's point about co-production and questioning what is it, what does it entail, and I think, Clinton, you've done an amazing job in taking co-production, right to in many ways across so many different angles of the project. You've taken it to as far as you can. Maybe there's more, but certainly I felt really extremely struck by the efforts that you've gone to to build in that engagement and involvement and leading role that the community has played in developing the project. And I think that's something that we should all learn. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I just wanted to add to that. There's a question in the chat that says from Milton, is there an audio version of the book? Is this addressed to Clinton, so that we can hear tones and regional language? And also I think because, with the advantages we now have with different types of technology, you could be using things like QR codes where, people could then be directed to a way to listen to the sounds directly from the book. So yeah, Clinton, is there an audio version, or will there be an audio version?
There has been a discussion about that. As I said, it almost sounds like an excuse. We're a small group, we're punching way above, but we wanted to make it an audio book. So there's two branches to this. There's book 2 and there's the audio book. So that's the next 2 that's coming out. I've got to admit at this point, it's not going to happen quickly. One of the things that you run into is that you start doing something and you get comfortable with it and people recognize it. If you increase the team, it kind of loses, it runs the risk of losing that intensity, that integrity. And because there's so much at stake within the community, I'm almost frightened of enlarging the team too much. That's the downside to it. I want to enlarge the team, but I want to retain the purity and all the pluses that we have. Because I've said to the group probably a dozen times, I'm getting bored with hearing it now. Thank you for trusting me with your story, because I come back to it again. It's about trust. Let me just pick up a question that wasn't asked to me. You were talking about the well-being of within the group and protecting people. I said that this group, particularly the ladies, ended up like a blood family group. At one of the rehearsals, one of the gatherings we had, one lady opened up a part of her life that she said at the end of the night, I had no idea why or how I opened that up. And immediately she opened it up, it was like a scene from the Western. The wagon trains all pulled round, the rest of the ladies all pulled round her, and there was an extended arm around her. And that welfare, I didn't design it in. I am conscious that I am constantly monitoring people and the well-being. That came from the group. You cannot design that into it. I really can't say enough about the uniqueness of this group. The self-man, they're up and running. They're actually putting me under pressure now, because I've made a commitment to do what I need to do to keep them together, and they will steer their own path. They're off and running. They're a unit of their own. I'm just trying to persuade the men now to be a little bit more proactive than they are. So, yeah.
Thank you, Clinton. It's actually really interesting, because I think as the chair of the group, of a history group, you're obviously really keen on facilitating the process. But I know that some of the challenges a lot of academics have depend on what sort of community group they are approaching, because sometimes you end up with the chairs of some types of community group actually want to act as more like gatekeepers, where they're protecting the wider community from academic, for exactly the reasons you said, but because they don't have an interest themselves in history or whatever, it becomes sort of, it gives an added layer of challenge. But I just wanted to come to the question that Joanna had put in the discussion, the chat section here, where she picks up again on this issue of transcription. And she says there's also the issue that people aren't always happy with how their speech looks when it's written for publication. Because a lot of people don't realize we have you know, even the first time I saw the way I speak in writing, I was horrified. I was like, my God, is this even a language? What's going on? You know, because I find that I go off on tangents, I don't finish sentences and all that kind of thing, and it can be quite a shock to see, you know, how you speak in writing. So yeah, I think that's a really interesting question from Joanna, and I was just wondering, has that been an issue with your group, Clinton?
No, you know what? I don't even think it reared its head on a single occasion. People have just, it can't all be good luck and it can't all be good planning, but what are the combination, the selection of the people that volunteered, and some came as recommendations after I've spoken to one person, but there isn't a single occasion I can remember things going back to the contributors for their approval, for them to say, well, that's a Monthrasham word. I don't think anybody outside of Monthrasham will understand it. It was left in. So no, it really wasn't an issue for us. It didn't rear its head at all.
That's interesting.
Sorry. Have you got a little bit of time? Because I was just wondering whether Glenetta would be happy to, you know, just give her view, because we've heard from, you know, it's just what did she feel like as a contributor to some of the things that we've been discussing, whether it's
Quiet side.
You know, sorry? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I think Clinton was on mute for a second there.
Not very well. Can you repeat your question, please?
Yes, I just wondered, you've been listening to some of the questions and issues people have been talking about, directed to Clinton and Helen from the sort of organizer point of view. I just wondered how you felt about contributing your story and seeing it, you know, working with the others to actually sort of see it in print. What was it like from your perspective?
What was it like? It's to be honest with you, I just felt it was my life was a nothing story. But the interviewer, he was so good at guiding you, not telling you what to say or anything. You just literally asked your question and you answered the question, and it was great. And for me, this reading the other ladies' stories, they were great. They were really, really great.
And what does it mean for you and, you know, your wider sort of family and friends to sort of see your story being recorded and sort of shared? You know, as a, you know, because you've got 11 people, but there might be similarities. Have you sort of had those conversations with your family and friends about your story being out in the public and sharing your experiences?
Well, the thing that surprised me was the fact of how similar our stories were. Different islands, different ages, different experiences, and yet our stories were so very, very similar. And even talking to other people, they would be able to say, yes, we did that, or yeah, my grandfather did that, or my grandmother did that. There was a huge similarity between all the people from the different islands as well.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from anyone at her? Because I was also interested to hear Clinton, I know you're talking to schools now, you're talking about the project and the work that you do in general with schools and other young people. But I was wondering whether you had any kind of advice or suggestion for Helen, who's embarking on her project, and she's doing the intergenerational bit where the young people are going to interview the older people, and whether, whether it's something that you've tried before, even if it's not recorded, whether you've had conversations, sessions where this was discussed, and whether there is something that, Helen needs to bear in mind embarking on that approach.
Yeah, I said earlier at one point that it's about being yourself, being honest, being respectful, and patient. And once you enter with that kind of a tool bag, you've a better than, well, you've a 90% chance of succeeding. I think a lot of mature generations are brilliant at spotting fakes and forgeries. And they'll just climb up on you, full stop. So it's about that honesty. It's about being you. They'll know that you're nervous. They'll know that you're prickly about the language that you're using and the gap between your language and their language. They'll put you at ease. They will absolutely put you at ease. But it has to radiate from you that you're genuine, you're sincere, and it's not just a means of paying my bills or boosting my academic standing or personal standing wherever. Because again, if you go down into the younger generation, it's not about reputation building. It's about the ownership. It's our history. It's history that wants to be captured. It's history that needs to be told, and it's an integral part. And I think that's the only kind of steer I'd offer at the moment. I suppose if I think about it on the moral, then something else might pop up. But again, through Anita, if there's a question comes up afterwards, then please just email me. And one thing you will get is an honest answer, whether that's this is the answer or I don't know, but I might know somebody who can give me that. Because that's what that's what networks are about. That's what building webs are about. We don't have the means to be recreating the wheel. We don't have a wealth of resources to be throwing around. So we have to make it work. Absolutely work to the best of our ability.
Thank you for that, Clinton. It's now 7:30. We've come to the end of this particular session. But I think I've been left with 4 key words from Clinton: trust, can-do attitude, honesty, and integrity. So obviously be genuine about the relationships that you want to build with the community, and you'll end up on a positive note there, I think. Clinton, thank you so much for your presentation. It's been really fascinating. Absolutely fascinating to hear from you too, Helen. A really interesting project in terms of railway and politics, but also just hearing the challenges that you're facing. And Padmini, thank you so much. That you're really, really wonderful to listen to your engagement with both of today's speakers. And I just wanted to remind everyone that our next event, it's called The Lens Doesn't Lie, and it's a discussion on oral history in film and video. That's going to be taking place on Thursday, the 20th of June. So just keep an eye out for the registration link via either the IHR events page or the oral history website. But on behalf of everybody, thank you so much to everybody for this evening. And we look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you.